My name's Emmett Lalish. I'm from Google, and I'm going to be talking here about making the most of 3D on the web with Model Viewer. So, of course, most of the talks here on all the various aspects of the pipeline have covered the bulk of that pipeline. I'm going to cover the very bitter end of that pipeline, which is your actual end users who don't know anything about 3D getting to interact with the magical things that you have put so much effort with your pipeline into, right? So this is my job. I've been the maintainer of Model Viewer for about 4 years now. Working on it for a bit longer than that. So yeah, near and dear to my heart here. And I just want to say that what Model Viewer is. I'm looking forward to Gary's talk right after me on Babylon JS. Because of course in Babylon, you can do anything, right? Like that's a whole game engine. You can make incredible experiences. It's incredible. Model Viewer is not a game engine. Model Viewer is much smaller, much simpler. And the target audience for Model Viewer is not so much like developers, it's web devs. It's folks who actually build websites. Bread and butter, of course, is e-commerce, but museums, lots of other folks as well. And the whole idea of Model Viewer is that it's easy, right? I mean, here you see the sum total of what it takes to get this 3D model onto the web here. It's you load up the script and you put one Model Viewer tag on your website. It's kind of like an image tag. It's kind of like a video tag. You can customize it. It's great. And I mean, it's built on Three.js, right? So like, I'm not really building a web renderer. I do contribute to Three.js here and there, but still, like what Model Viewer is really about is packaging this into a nice, stable framework that's really approachable to people who are not 3D developers. And I'll pull out right here. Lots of people have made Model Viewers. There's other ones around. It's not really that hard. But the devil's in the details. And I like to remind people that like a big part of what I've done to make Model Viewer into something that's worth working on is subtle things like the user experience. The ability to be able to move around a model and see exactly what you want to look at, but never end up inside the model, right? And never end up orbiting around a weird point in the middle of nowhere. Like we've all had experiences with 3D products, right? Like these are the kinds of things that you get with Model Viewer. It's this idea of not having to think about having a good, solid user experience. That's what we have put our effort into. And by default, this works. And this works for people who've never touched a 3D program in their lives and don't have the intuition of navigating around a 3D space the way that most of the people in this room do. But the sad fact, it makes me sad every day, that almost all usages of Model Viewer are literally this. They are a white rectangle on somebody's page with a 3D model in it, and that's it. Looking at you, Shopify. I say that my vision with Model Viewer is to replace the image carousel, right? The image carousel is utterly ubiquitous in e-commerce, right? This is just how we evaluate products. And it makes me sad every day that the stage we've gotten to after this many years is now we have an image carousel with one at the end that's a 3D model. That's like, all right, baby steps, I get it. But it does make me cry inside. The 3D is so much more than what that image carousel is capable of. And what we should be doing is making a better experience than the image carousel. Where like, I guess I'll just press next and I'll see it from somewhere or in some, I don't know. So maybe somebody will have an idea of what the next image ought to be. It'll be different on every page I've ever been to. Instead of, oh, I would like to see this part of the model. I would like to look over here now. I can, in 3D, you are giving the user the ability to actually drive the experience, to interact with it. And I feel like that should be central. We should be thinking about the user experience because that's how you get the value out of the 3D. But, baby steps. Everything is images right now. It takes time. I understand that. But I'm going to try to give some inspiration, at least, to what could be. So, I'm going to have a whole talk on this at SIGGRAPH. I'm going to talk about it also at some of the Khronos bots, so hopefully you'll see this. But I did a bunch of work on tone mapping. Turns out that we've been doing color wrong for a long time. If you've ever tried to make a nice bright blue blender or maybe a bright yellow banana and wondered why you just couldn't get it to look the blue or yellow you were hoping for, it's because of tone mapping. So I've developed what's now called the Khronos PBR neutral tone mapper to solve this problem, and I will be talking about that in depth. But color accuracy is really important in our field, and this very last step is a critical element of it. You can do an incredible job of managing your color all the way through the pipeline, and this will still bite you if you're not being careful. So things to keep in mind. But there's a lot of features in Model Viewer that people don't even realize are there. We have pretty powerful effects that we can add in now, like bloom. You can actually do all kinds of post-processing effects now, and it's interesting because this is an optional thing that you can add on top of Model Viewer. So the code required to do this is not a cost that most Model Viewer users have to pay. You can simply bring this in if you want it on your website. There's a lot of power, and this is just one of many effects, right? There's also, there's things like real-time ambient occlusion. It's not perfect, but like screen space ambient occlusion can get you some pretty cool effects. So interesting things to look at that are available that people probably don't even know exist in Model Viewer unless you actually wander through the docs pages. We did some work recently on simple stuff like making a background not look like garbage. We've had a skybox feature for a long time. Nobody ever used it. Of course. Why would you have a skybox that looks like you're infinitely far above whatever ground plane is inevitably in your skybox? The one thing it'd probably work for is the astronaut, right? If your skybox is like space, maybe that'd be okay. But for everything else, it's pointless. So we finally developed a ground projected skybox. Actually, I did put this back up in Three.js, so you can get to it there as well. But it's simple, but it allows you to actually have a skybox that looks like you're really somewhere. So there's features in here, and the fact that we now have the ability with this new format. Are you familiar with Ultra HDR? We've got a new image format. We're doing HDR, lighting, skyboxes. It's 10 to 30 times smaller than a .hdr file that we were all using before. I've got the same Draco WebP team to thank for this. Chrome's excellent compression engineers. They came up with this for the Android system because they're trying to take HDR photography. I took a look at that and said, wait, your spec is perfect. It is exactly what we need for custom lighting in e-commerce. And it works beautifully. Already supported in Model Viewer, Three.js, of course. And it's tiny, and there's an easy converter. You just drop your HDR in and you get a JPEG. And it's backwards compatible. Can you believe that? You can look at this JPEG on your operating system and it will give you a regular thumbnail. Of course, it doesn't know about the HDR, but they packed it all in there in a nice backwards compatible way. Oh, I love it. Anyway, please use it. It's great. Other things you might not know about Model Viewer. This is not a beautiful model. I'm sorry. I'm an engineer, so this was done quickly. But we can do animated textures. We've been talking about putting an extension in for glTF for this for a while. Hopefully it will happen one of these days. But in the meanwhile, you can do this in Model Viewer, no problem. You got a video? Sure, toss it out of your texture, no biggie. By the way, we don't just do MPEG videos. We certainly can, but we can also make just a canvas 2D. You can literally draw anything you want live based on user input on the web. I don't know. Scott, the world is your oyster. You want people to just paint on your model? Go for it. But we can also handle Lottie animations, which, by the way, are amazing for UI, right? Talking to the Adobe folks here, right? There's tools for this. And if you want like a not pixelated UI screen actually doing its thing, Lottie animations are a fantastic way to go. So no problem. We have, this is really important. The thing I want to always remind people of is that we talk about 3D models, but we're talking about 3D models on the web. The web is a really powerful platform. The web has incredible text rendering, incredible accessibility features, localization, all kinds of things that are an enormous pain in the ass in a 3D situation, right? So what we encourage people to do with Model Viewer is combine the two. Make use of DOM, where 2D DOM does great things, and marry that to the 3D that you have with glTF and WebGL and all of that. And so, here's a simple example where maybe you want dimensions on your model. Well, no problem. We can attach, we have APIs to basically attach DOM content to a projected position from 3D space. You can do almost anything with that. Here's one example of attaching them to dimension coordinates. You can even draw dimension lines with SVGs. Just connect those 2D coordinate points that we project for you. These are the kinds of things that they take a little bit of code, but not very much, right? That's the real beauty of this kind of thing. And the best part is all of your existing accessibility and localization systems that you have for your website, well, they still work because this is just DOM. It's nothing fancy. It's not a different system, right? So just from a practicality perspective, this is nice. And you can do more than that too. Like we even built an animated version of this system, right? So now you can attach your points not to a static position in 3D space. You can actually attach them to your mesh. So now if your mesh is animated, whether it's skeletal or morph target or whatever else, well, now your points can actually follow along with your animation, which, you're probably not going to be drawing a horse, again, engineer here, but I'm hoping you can imagine how this can be useful for your Pixel Fold phone as it folds open and you want to show them where the power buttons are gone and all that kind of thing, right? Like this is all totally doable now. And with our online editor, it makes it easy to just point and click to get these point values. You don't have to go do a bunch of math to figure out where the nose of the horse is. We do that for you. Another little known thing here, and this is something that I am not sure any 3D viewer does besides Model Viewer. Really, I built this into Three.js, and this was something I'm proud of and designed myself, which is how do you properly composite transparent 3D rendering with DOM content from the web, okay? I am not allowed to read those background is visible pixels, right? The browser is doing that. In WebGL, I don't get access to that. There's no way, okay? All I'm allowed to do is paint pixels onto a transparent background and hand them to Chrome's compositor to bake on top of those pixels it already drew. There is no possible way to do that correctly with PBR rendering. Just not going to happen. The compositing path doesn't support that. So we have to fake it. And what I did was did my best to fake it. And I think we faked it pretty well, right? You can see there's we're getting, the green tinted black lettering through the green tinted windshield. And yet when you get that bright white specular reflection, it kind of overwhelms that black. I'll tell you right now, it's not physically correct, but it does the trick. And this is the kind of thing that we put effort into because this is what makes it look like it's part of your web design, right? This is what makes it look not like a rectangle that's sitting in a corner of your page, but like it's actually part of the experience that you're making. And I really want people to think of 3D more that way because that's the way you're going to make the best user experiences. So now I'm going to move on to some things that other folks have done. Outside of using Model Viewer, but not talking to me about it. And I'm pretty impressed by what Red Bull is doing here. So this is a really cool technique, right? They have completely married their 3D model with everything else on this page, which is 2D, right? Like this circle is not a 3D object. That's part of their DOM. All of this text, everything else here, right? This is all 3D stuff. But there's occlusion, there's all this beautiful thing, and it looks like the rest of it's 3D. Why? Well, because they've locked the camera in such a way that the only way you can interact with it doesn't break the illusion of the rest of the 2D actually being 3D. So now what they've really done is they've taken their 3D model and they've made their entire 2D page appear like it's 3D. They've fooled us with not a lot of effort. I love this kind of thing. This is what we should be thinking about more, is how we can do simple things to make an experience just pop. So if we come back and I work a lot with the Google Store, as you might imagine. We don't have very many products. They care a lot about those products. So they're very picky, and they're starting to do a pretty decent job. It makes me sad that it's still way behind a click. You'll see here all of this stuff is regular 2D DOM, and there's this hidden little explore in 3D button, and maybe someday we'll make it past that button so somebody actually sees this. But they've made a really beautiful experience here. They have very high quality 3D models, and they're making proper use of variants, right? You can really explore. But what I love is that they can tell a story. You can go through these arrows and it takes you through the different parts. And here, of course, there isn't even any text to go along with this, but that's obviously the next place we're going, right? But it's nice because the user still has full control. They can explore this however they want. But if you want to give them an idea, you can say, oh no, but this is the next place that you want to take a look at, right? And I love this kind of a user experience, and I really encourage more people to think about this, because you want to tell your users a story, but do you have to tell that story by scrolling down the page endlessly? There are better ways, right? We can do that all in one context here. So I try to remind people that this is the way to take a look. And you can do the same thing with, for instance, the pixel buds. I really appreciate that they make use, for instance, of not just camera motion, but you can also make use of animation, right? You can have an animated model, and as part of the going through the process of learning, you can be scrubbing through your animation. And this is like yet another way that you can show how to interact. And yet it's not static. It's not just a video. They can still look at it however they want, but you can also guide them. And I think that combination is really powerful. One of my personal favorite things is my wife is a biologist, and we've done a lot of work with the search education team, and proven that, in fact, Model Viewer is performant enough to be included right on the Google search page. I get a lot of, I'm sure we've all gotten feedback. They're like, oh, these 3D models are kind of big. Oh, Model Viewer, that's a bunch of code. Like, can we really have this in our latency budget? If it's good enough for Google search, I think you can probably manage it on your e-commerce website. To say that the requirements are stringent is, yeah, that's an understatement. But, here we've got this, and we can bring up this diagram, and here's Model Viewer, and they've really done a great job of making something that's truly interactive, something that's designed to teach people things, right? Like, oh, what is this thing over here? Oh, that's the Golgi apparatus? Oh, interesting. Or maybe what is it? Where's the mitochondria? Oh, the mitochondria is over here. Interesting, right? Like, and I love the fact this was actually an intern project that they made a game out of this. So I'd highly encourage you all to test it out and see, like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's the nucleus over there. Yep, okay. What was that? Where were the vesicles? Let me see here. Was that this one? No. But all of this is just a bit of JavaScript, right? Everything here is DOM. That's what made this an intern project. It was quick. It was easy. It was 2D. But by marrying it with the 3D, you make such a more compelling experience. So I just want to make everybody aware that there's a lot that we can do. And then this is one of my favorites. Somebody made an actual music video using Model Viewer. Like, they had an animated 3D model. They're spinning around their thing, playing music to it. So obviously you can find us modelviewer.dev. It's open source, of course, GitHub Model Viewer, and we've become a bit of a repository for questions related to glTF, really 3D formats and pipeline stuff in general. So by all means, come ask questions. Also come answer questions. You'll find a lot of your users there. But yeah, I would also like to open the floor to your questions.